see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
Okay. Could you just introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Bernard. Bernard Hall. I live in Auckland, New Zealand, and I have a lot of empathy for the empathy and compassion movement. I really appreciate what Edwin is doing here. I think it's high time our culture actually developed these qualities. They are, significant at this time in, I think, our human evolution, that we're actually, taking this very seriously, and we're, putting it out there. I think our lives, everybody's lives, would go a lot more smoothly if we could actually embody these characteristics.
Yeah, and you've joined the volunteer team for building the conference, developing the conference, and you put together a list of questions, and it's I have the list here. I'm just putting online that so it's kind of empathy and compassion conference, vision and strategy, and there's a whole list of questions you put together to start just kind of to address like what the conference is about, and just kind of starting a dialogue around that, and to really start articulating the vision and the strategy and the kind of step-by-step parts to putting this together. So I really appreciate that, because there was really good questions there. So we now want to just kind of go through basically line by line, just kind of talking about each component, right?
Right. Yeah, well, I start off with vision, and I guess vision is the first thing that usually occurs to people when they've got an idea in mind, and it usually occurs to people in terms of, tangible characteristics. What does it look and feel like, and then after that comes purpose, which is really about, what is our motivation for doing this? Why are we doing it? Why is it important? And where does it actually lead? Beyond, over and above the actual over and above the actual goal itself. And then we look at values, and values can actually be, they're all integrated, but values are kind of, what is it we want to deliver? How do we want to experience it? How do we want to feel about it? How do we want other people to feel about it? What is it we're actually trying to promote? The benefits of, of this project. So yeah, that's basically all I've got to say on this at the moment. But obviously there's more. We can drill down and look into it in a little bit more depth. We look at the deliverables, the specific goals that we want to deliver, the people, what sort of engagement we want them to have, how we want to promote it, how it's going to operate, the timing, etc. But yeah, I guess that's where I'm going with this.
Okay, so under the vision, what would success in this conference look like? And the overall vision, for me, is that we need to kind of transform society and raise the value of empathy within society, and that just raising the level. It's not like it's going to be total transformation. Everybody's suddenly empathic, but I think we can definitely raise that level, and I think it will have a an important effect on the society, and perhaps I'm almost thinking it's like the only thing that can really save us as a species, or the planet almost, because with all these conflicts and wars and just even in the United States, you just see it in the political realm, with the constant fighting. It's like it's just not it's just nothing's getting done. There's no problem solving done, and you know, for solving problems, we need empathic action, which means, you know, people need to connect and then, you know, empathically connect, really know who we are, you know, who the other person is, what their values are, and then work together with them through empathic action to solve problems. So the success is, you know, in a broad sense, is raising the level of empathy, and you know how that looks, and you know, and kind of specifically, I would say part of it is just dialogue. Is when I've been doing the conferences, I mean not the conference, but the panels, one of the things that comes up was we just have to start a dialogue. You know, it's like bring this into dialogue and get the country, you know, the people just starting to talk about it and thinking about it, and
Right.
and just to promote that dialogue. And I kind of see this as that dialogue generating engine that the conference is getting people. Like right now, I didn't, you know, I had never met you like 2 weeks ago, and now you and I are in this dialogue. So right now, this is like success. This is like and you've kind of engaged into thinking about how to promote empathy. So right here we have you know, some success.
Okay. So if you were to sort of like put that down in one sentence, on that, answering that question, you would say, I mean, there are a couple of keys that came to me. It's like promoting empathy in society, dialogue. You know, how we do it is through dialogue. That's how it would start to look. I would, you know, possibly qualify that dialogue with, you know, the tone of the dialogue. It would actually be a respectful dialogue. You know, that's my personal. Yeah, I mean that, you know, that's what I personally feel about that.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so it's kind of like a respectful dialogue between people.
Yeah. So with that, there's obviously there are various components with that. There's, you know, like there's the emotional side of it, but there's also, you know, the skillful side of it as well. So, I mean, definitely, I would see that you'd want to be able to promote and train people with the skills, but also be able to skillfully handle, you know, emotions around all of that, or teach people to be able to handle emotions. You know, I mean that would be. I think there's
emotional intelligence, kind of.
Yeah,
if you're
yeah,
with, and that's pretty much Daniel Goleman, I think, wrote about that. And if you look at his work, it's like empathy is like a core component to that whole
right
model that he has.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, when we talk about skills, you know, especially dialoguing skills, I should imagine that there are a number of skills there. You know, there's, you know, the ability to articulate, you know, emotions and feelings, but also, you know, the ability to sort of look at them intelligently, and also there's a vital component is the ability to be able to actually listen to, you know, the other side of the dialogue. You know, listening in a patient sort of way as well. So, you know, we could actually have those, you know, just drill those down a little bit.
Yeah, there's a whole series of skills that could be learned to deepen empathy, and what we really need for that is, you know, like a curriculum, you know, like a step-by-step curriculum that people can go through. And that's actually one of the goals of the conference. Is, you know, it's a broad looking at how do we build a culture of empathy and compassion, but then to start having sub-conferences that get more specific. And one of them is, you know, how to teach empathy in the education system, which could really be the grounding, you know, space for getting people together to start looking at how to develop this curriculum. And we have a project that we started. We call it the free online empathy curriculum, and it's to create an online curriculum that anybody can, you know, freely access. Be kind of like a wiki, you know, like an empathy curriculum wiki.
Right.
So, and
Okay. Is that within the scope of the actual, the conference that we're talking about here?
this is,
Or,
this is like a lifelong process,
right.
commitment for me. So the conference I'm starting to see is sort of the engine for engaging people to work on all these different, aspects of building a culture of empathy.
Okay. So I would suggest that you would need to put that down there under your vision. Create an engine, for, as you described it. I would suggest that that needs to be put in there.
You're welcome to edit too. So
All right. Okay.
it's like we can both, keep jotting down whatever.
Okay.
It's a nice metaphor.
Yeah.
I mean, the engine, thinking of it as an engine.
Yeah.
It might be more for engineering types, though. We need something.
Yeah, I was going to say it's pretty mechanistic.
Yeah, we need something that's more of a soft or a caring kind of a metaphor. It's the mother of of empathy or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, we can have both. One, so you appeal to different people.
Yeah. 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 Okay. So another part of the vision is having this curriculum, this online curriculum. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like a farther along the line. I mean, the page.
So that's not actually part of the actual conference itself.
Right now it isn't, but I'm hoping. Like we just had a panel yesterday, and two of the people are one of them is working on a curriculum, an empathy curriculum at in Arizona State, and the other one is an artist, and she's does workshops on acting. So she's coming here to the Bay Area next month, and we're going to do like a empathy clinic where we start working on this parts of this curriculum. So and that relationship came out of just having done that panel yesterday.
Right. Okay.
So I was just adding maybe.
Yeah, I see that.
And strengthen the empathy muscle.
Yeah.
Which is kind of under this clinic.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of flexible like that as we kind of see the opportunities. Like if enough people are interested in a curriculum, we can start creating panels and even a sub-conference on how do we develop a curriculum.
Yeah.
So see, that's where it's the engine. It's like the engine can, spawn off other projects.
Yeah.
But the overall thing is let's just transform society.
Right.
And raise the empathy level, in ourselves, in our relationships, in our family, in our neighbors, our friends, in society.
Edwin, I was thinking that one of the crucial aspects, of what you're doing here is actually like promoting the value of empathy. A lot of people, I can imagine, wouldn't actually recognize what the value of empathy is. I mean, it's kind of like you might explain to somebody and just sort of say, well, it's, like feeling another person's pain. And they might just sort of, well, why would I want to do that?
Yeah.
But it's like, in a way, we've got to look at empathy as, a commodity in a way, using marketing jargon. And how would people actually benefit? You know, individuals actually benefit from having empathy. What does it actually mean? You know, what does it mean to them? You know.
Yeah. So here at the, it's like, you know, what is empathy? You know, why would anyone care? Or what is?
Yeah. Yeah. And it, you know, like what is the value of it in terms of how is it going to help me as an individual, you know, navigate my life?
Okay, how would they benefit? How is it going to help me as an individual uh, to navigate my life? Yeah, what is it for you? You know, that's kind of a good question. What's it? I mean, personally, Bernard, for you, what does it do for you?
Well, for me personally, it enables me to take on a different frame of reference. You know, to actually sort of see where, you know, to have another perspective of life. You know, it actually engages my imagination. It engages my intelligence. I feel, you know, like I'm expanding my mind, you know, by actually having empathy, by utilizing empathy. I can expand my mind more. But not only that, it builds up a sense of trust in my relationships. You know, I can afford to risk, you know, take more risks with people. And, you know, the more I practice it and demonstrate it, the more I'm able to actually get to the truth of, you know, in my communication. So, you know, it really helps me, you know, become a lot more truthful in communication.
So I have here, take on a different frame of reference, see other perspectives, engage my intelligence and mind more, develop trust in relationships, get to the truth in my communications. So it's kind of around that quality is people empathize and don't judge. You know, we're able to, I mean, I see it in myself, able to open up more and share more of the deeper sense of who I am and what's really going on for me. Because if people out there judging me and criticizing me and all that kind of stuff, I kind of, I put up a wall and don't reveal what it is, who I am. And it's kind of lonely. You know, that's a lonely kind of a place to be.
Well, that's obviously that's another really important value of empathy is that sense of belonging, you know, and sense of being, you know, an intrinsic part of, you know, part of the universe. You know, it's like, where do I fit? You know, obviously with somebody with a highly developed sense of empathy, you know, can feel comfortable anywhere, you know, and can feel like they belong anywhere.
Yeah, so you mean, I mean, for you, like, what is it in different communities or in different groups, or how is it that it's kind of playing out personally?
Yeah, it's in, you know, it's in different groups and different communities, you know, and different, you know, social settings as well, obviously. But also, yeah, the other thing is that, you know, people become more and more interesting. You know, it's like the more empathetic I am, and take a real interest in someone else, you know, they actually become more interesting, and you know, it's like people have their own stories and whatnot, and and when you can actually listen to somebody else's story, it's like, in a way, you could there's parallels to sort of like reading a book or whatever it might be.
Well, the metaphor I have for empathy is that empathy is like a cornucopia. So, if you're right, it's like, and each person for me is like a cornucopia of feelings, experiences, stories that kind of, pours out of us. And through empathies is kind of like the way that we can share each other's cornucopia.
Yeah.
So it kind of enriches, our lives at an emotional level where it kind of expands the range of experience that we have, emotional experience.
Yeah. Oh, is that you or is that me?
Oh, that's me, but I'll let the machine get it and listen.
Okay. Okay. So, how do you think we're doing on vision here?
Well, we're just kind of, bringing out some ideas and.
Okay. Okay.
You
I think one of the things about this is that we've actually got, we're getting a little bit sidetracked in a way because we're talking about empathy in an overall perspective, but we actually need to sort of focus in on the conference a little bit here, I think. So if we had a look at the overall qualities and characteristics that we want this conference to have, how would we describe them?
For me, it's open and eclectic.
Okay.
There's some groups that, it's like it's very much their process, their way of doing things. And I like it, like, bring in everybody, bring in all the different traditions,
Right.
bring in, the mindfulness community, the art community, the psychiatry, therapists, academics, the scientists. So I like it from the kind of the widest perspective, and that everyone is included. Because that was actually in our discussion yesterday that came up, that empathy is such a disciplinary experience.
Yeah.
It really cuts across just like all these different traditions.
Right. Yeah. Did you ever see J.K. Rowling's Sanford address?
Yeah. She actually talked about empathy, I think, in that.
Yeah, she did. And, she was talking about her involvement in her work, with Amnesty International. And she was talking about the power of empathy and imagination, Obviously, she's a very imaginative person. And, but, having empathy sort of increase that, or, both, mutually supporting qualities, imagination and empathy. I thought it was a very, very powerful speech. Actually,
Yeah.
It's one of the better speeches I've seen.
Yeah, I remember that one. It was really good. She's very articulate and kind of presented it in a really nice way.
Yeah. But it is. There's a huge huge sense of privilege you get when you can actually when somebody opens up and intimates their story to you. When they trust you enough to tell to tell you their story. It's enormously gratifying. When that sort of thing happens. There aren't necessarily sort of tangible benefits to that, but they're certainly intangible benefits.
Well, there are tangible benefits. Say when people open up and share their stories.
Yeah.
Okay. And what actually happens is kind of tangibly is that, you know, as we connect with I'm so glad I'm not sitting there in this. We have like how many 5,000 miles separating us from the smoke. But as we kind of connect, you know, empathically and have that sense of connection and relaxation, that there's actually our body releases oxytocin at that point.
Yeah.
And that's that feeling, that warm feeling that you get. I mean, and so there is actually physiological stuff happening through the empathic, you know, kind of connection like that. So it's not like, it's not just, you know, it's not making more widgets. It's just, you know, it's having a physical effect. And that effect actually is calming and relaxing and reduces stress and actually makes you live longer.
Yeah.
You know, because stress is one of the big killers. So in a sense, you know, you better have empathy if you want to live long, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
As he smokes his his talking about living long. And I'm coughing not because I smoke, but I got a cold.
You've been too empathetic there, Edwin.
That could be it. So. You know, I'm just going to put on some water for tea.
Yeah, sure.
So I'll be back in just like about 30 seconds.
Not a problem.
Yeah, this tea is very soothing for my throat, so my cough. So I've only got a little bit left, so I'm going to make some more.
All right.
Okay, what are the overall qualities and characteristics do you want this conference to have? Open and eclectic, inclusive, and it's not academic. It's just to be. That's just one of the many.
Okay, I hadn't finished typing there.
Oh.
I was just catching on with your conversation, you know, talking about, you know, the types of people, or, you know, types of application of empathy, you know, from academia, artists, you know, business, certainly, you know, in sales, empathy is vital. You know, how can you actually, you know, sell anything unless you're empathetic with your customer and finding out, you know, what sort of problems they have and how your solution can actually fit those problems, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, from that perspective, empathy is absolutely vital. Also, you know, business management and leadership. Obviously, if you're empathetic with the, you know, members of your team, you know that, you know, the team get to trust you, you know, and, you know, where you're leading them, you know, and, you know, and they tend to, you know, be a lot more committed and engaged in their work. But also, you know, with your colleagues, you know, where if you're empathetic with your work colleagues, obviously that, you know, it adds to team cohesion, you know.
Well, I had sort of broken it down in those categories, and you know, I've kind of organized it like that on the newspaper. I don't know if you've seen the Empathy Cafe newspaper.
No, I haven't actually seen that document.
Well, let me put that in the document, and it breaks down. I curate this magazine, like all the articles. You know, I have a Google alert and other alerts that as I see articles, I put them into these different, usually you can scoop it.
Right.
And I put it on, and so it's broken down in, you know, teaching empathy, empathy in education, empathy in animals, empathy in the workplace, empathy in justice, empathy in healthcare, empaths, empathy in the arts, self-empathy, self-compassion, you know. So it's kind of like what you were addressing. And you could have like empathy with the studies. There's all these academic studies that come out too.
Yeah. Edwin, I've just got somebody at the door. I'm going to be about a minute or so, okay?
Okay. Oh, I made some tea.
Okay.
Thought I'd use that minute to make my little peppermint and honey tea. Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine. Okay. So are there any other qualities or characteristics that we need to note in terms of the success of the conference?
Okay, we have open, eclectic, inclusive, and I'm thinking creative. So I hope it has a creative quality that people can bring their creativity to bear. For example, in creating different types of panels, and that the panels can kind of evolve in a creative fashion.
Right.
I would hope that at some point there's a sense of action as well, empathic action, that we actually start doing something.
Okay, so how would we describe that as a characteristic? So that would be sort of like practical.
Yeah, I call it empathic action. It's like taking some kind of steps. I'm not quite sure what that would be. I know we're looking at doing like a sub-conference on empathy within the Occupy movement.
Right.
Like I would like to see, you know, part of the Occupy movement be about building a culture of empathy and actually advocating for policy changes within the government to promote empathy. Like here in Oakland, you know, I'd love to see, you know, the city of Oakland hold a citywide conference on how to build a culture of empathy.
Right.
And actually, you know, advocate for that. And because they sure need it because of all the things. Because of, you know, the conflicts that are going on, and, you know, the police and the city and the demonstrators aren't really communicating very well.
Right. Right. Okay.
Or there's this initiative for empathy in the schools, and that, you know, people start actually looking for how to implement that in the schools, you know, start having programs that are teaching empathy.
Okay. So in a way, there's kind of you want initiatives to sort of grow out of the conference, don't you? Really, you know, such as empathy in the schools and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's kind of like you want the conference to be a launching pad, you know, for yeah. I mean, in a way, you want the conference to be a launching pad for initiatives.
Yeah. A launching pad. We're getting a lot of different good metaphors here. We got a launching pad. We got an engine. we're really we're really moving along here on this metaphor generating.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now, this other question here, you know, how would you recognize it if it was successful? You know, how would we recognize whether the conference was succeeding or not?
Well, one thing would be is that we interview or get. I have this empathy expert list. It's about 80 people who kind of found or kind of the, you know, working on this in one way or another quite intensely, and to actually get all of them involved would be, you know, on panels would be one sense, you know, like one sense of success. You know, getting a lot of people talking and doing panels would be another success.
Okay, I'm just going to put on here involvement. You know, as one of the overall qualities and characteristics. So there we go. Involvement and engagement. Yeah. Another idea I have, Edwin, is like if people who are attracted to the conference participate or whatever involvement they have, they've got a clear, there's a clear path for them, for their involvement and engagement. So.
Yeah, so getting a lot of people involved, that a lot of people get involved, and that they are able to kind of be involved kind of productively, know how to, what to do, what the steps are.
I like that word, productive. Yeah. Okay. Do you think we've got a clear enough vision there, Edwin, as we look through these questions?
It seems like a start, that's
yeah.
I find it helpful just to kind of go through it and.
Right. Yeah, I mean, one of the what I'd like to be able to do is just have a vision statement eventually, and just sort of boil it all down into, just 2 or 3 sentences that captures the whole vision of, of what we're wanting to do with this conference. And I think, what we've done here, I think, has given us enough material to sort of like, play around with that. So maybe that's some work that we can do individually, and keep each other appraised of that.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of boiled it down to the vision is we want to build a culture of empathy. So it's like the name of the organization, it's the name of the conference. Let's build a culture of empathy, and maybe it doesn't. People don't quite know what all that means, but it's kind of like educating people around that. But that's kind of like the guiding vision is like, let's build this culture of empathy, and
right.
Then I guess the vision is, what does that look like? And part of it is just engaging people to start thinking, what does a vision of empathy, a culture like that look like?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I mean, that's kind of like the broad scope of, what you're describing here. But in a way, we've got to put it into context of the conference itself. So I mean, that's the broad scope of the movement, of what you're trying to create. But the conference itself is, we've got to be, narrow it down so that the scope is, quite specific, to the conference. Well, that's how I see it anyway. But
yeah, well, we can try to kind of explore that. And
okay, all right. Well, let's move on to purpose then. Okay, so we've got 3 main questions here. What is the conference for? What do you want the conference to do for you? What is the main theme of the conference? So the overall, what is the conference for? What comes to mind when you think about that question?
I think it's for connecting with people. You know, starting there's a documentary I saw about Gene Sharp. He wrote the book on nonviolence.
Right.
You know, I don't know if you know him, but he was kind of influential, developing the techniques for kind of for going from dictatorial regimes to more democratic regimes. And they, you know, all these organizations, you know, in Eastern Europe and Egypt and, you know, the Middle East, etc., they've used a lot of his techniques. And so they did a documentary on him. And he was talking about that in a dictatorship, people feel isolated. They feel disconnected from each other, and they think like they're the only ones.
Right.
So the conference kind of brings people together to realize that they're not the only ones that value empathy and compassion. And we in one of our calls, you know, the volunteer calls, there was somebody, I think, from like Bulgaria or somewhere, and she had kind of done some work around empathy, but she was in the call and she started talking and she started like really breaking down in tears because she says, you know, this feels so good that I know I'm not the only one. You know, I've been feeling so isolated around this. And so this is kind of like getting people together to connect and realize that they're not the only ones that really, you know, value empathy and
would
like
so we could say is that how you would articulate that? Creating the realization that we are not alone?
Yeah, that would be one. What is a conference for? Not alone. It's kind of like in wanting to live empathically or in a or raise the value of empathy. So creating the realization that we are not alone in wanting to live empathically or in a culture of empathy or raise the value of empathy, something.
Right.
Yeah, it's like it would have been nice to have recorded that call. People didn't want it recorded, but you know, to have those personal stories, you know, it'd be really nice to have because she was really, you'd just feel the emotion in that.
Yeah.
And it really captured, you know, it's like that emotion really captured that sense of, you know, connection. And, you know, people feel isolated. They think, oh, you know, everybody's in it for themselves. You know, if I'm not in it for myself, you know, I'm going to be taken advantage of. And, you know, if they realize, hey, there's all these other people that want a vision of a culture of empathy, it's like encouraging. Yeah, like it's doable. It gives them hope, and then you have that hope, and you can kind of take action more easily out of that hope.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, in a way, it's you know, like the way I like to think of it sometimes is that we have this inner reality, you know, in our own minds, and then there's this outer reality, you know, and when there's a big barrier between the two, we think this inner reality is either invalid, you know, or you know, the outer reality is you know, just so skew with compared to, you know, what the inner reality is. But with empathy, it actually sort of bridges that gap, you know, between the inner reality and the outer reality. In other words, you know, when you start, you know, working with like-minded people and realize that they're on your side, you realize that you're not nuts. You're not crazy. You're not the only one with those feelings. You're not an isolated little blob of humanity. Sort of caught somewhere in the world. There's a big world out there, and there are a lot of other people who feel exactly the same way as you.
Yeah, it takes away that sense of isolation.
Yeah, yeah.
And kind of to see yourself reflected in other people's. There's in other people and in the world at large. It's like a sense of connection with the whole of of sense of life and connection. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels great.
Okay. So, I mean, that's another thing is like, developing a strong sense of aliveness. And meaning, I would suggest.
Yeah.
I'd say connection. Yeah. Okay. The other thing is do you see, in a way, this idea just occurred to me. Is it? Are we trying to sort of like create a sense of empathic activism, and foster sort of empathic activists?
Yeah, it is. I use that word sometimes, empathic activists or evangelical empathy.
Oh, God, no. Please do not use that.
Well, it's a non-religious. But it's that sense of well, let's see. So I was talking with a friend of mine, and I was saying, it's like you listen when we do empathy. You can do empathy listening to someone, and then it's like you hear them, and then there's not a sense of naming what we're doing, that it's empathy and empathic listening, and there's not a sense of naming it and passing it forward. And so we came up with the idea of a free empathy card. So empathy is feeling and
you need to put it on the other camera.
Am I putting it?
Yeah.
This is the one that you're seeing.
Can you pull it back? Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. Let me. Yeah. I'm using two different cameras here. Can you read that?
Yeah. No, that's wonderful.
But then here's the other side.
Pull it back a bit. Pull that. Pass it on. Take action to build culture. That's brilliant. Yeah, no, that's wonderful, Edwin. I saw this quote somewhere sometime. It was like, empathy is the most subversive action.
Yeah, is the most revolutionary feeling. That was from Gloria Steinem.
Yeah.
The woman, a feminist activist. She said empathy is the most. Well, there was a talk she gave, and she said empathy is the most revolutionary emotion. And then she goes on to say that Marx had it wrong. The means don't justify the ends. It's the ends are the means.
Yeah, or so the ends.
So if we want a culture of empathy, we can't use violence, and hate and all that to get there. We have to use empathy to get there. So the means of empathy are the ends to a culture of empathy, basically. So this was our evangelical, empathy card. And you pass this out. We're going to be creating an event, a Facebook event for working on this project next week. So you'll see it, and there's a link to, you can download the card and print it out and just start giving it out.
That's pretty cool.
It's a fun one, yeah.
Okay. Right, so the next question was, are we done with that question?
I think for now.
What is the conference for? Okay. What do we want the conference to do for you? Or actually, that should be for us. What do we want? What do we want to serve? Do we Okay. In broad terms, let's just focus on that that main question. What do we want the conference to do for us? What are the first thoughts that come to your mind with that one, Edwin?
Well, I always have these broad, brushes, and it's all is building the culture of empathy. It's like, if it's us in the largest societies that we raise the value of empathy, if it's for the participants, for myself, I've kind of like dedicated, kind of the rest of my life to this theme, this topic. So it's just kind of moving the whole project kind of forward, the whole endeavor.
Okay, so it's, in other words, it's like creating traction.
Yeah. Who is the us in that question that you see?
Sorry?
Who is the us in that question?
I guess everybody involved in it, engaged in it. Okay. But I think it's also important to answer that question, on a personal level. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Right, okay.
Thank you.
I've got an internet connection problem.
Well, for me, I'm hoping that it creates a way of engaging people. Like now, whenever I meet someone, I say, "Oh, would you like to be part of the conference?" And it's a way of kind of organizing. It's like an organizational tool to organize people's energy.
Right.
It kind of gives it a direction. It gives it a structure. And it seems like it's kind of working. People are getting together to be on these volunteer, teams. They're starting to they can be panel producers, and they're kind of getting excited about that. And then they're talking, lining up 3 or 4 other people to be on the panel. And so it's a little bit of a, somebody said, "Oh, this is like a Ponzi scheme," It's like a Ponzi. It's a Ponzi scheme for empathy.
Right. Okay.
In that, somebody becomes a panel producer, and then they talk to 3 or 4 of their friends and get them thinking about this, and they start talking about it, and then they can even keep spreading like that. And you know, I mean, personally, it's you know, I'm hoping that the conference, you know, we can generate some income and kind of get this center for building a culture of empathy, you know, kind of on some kind of financial, you know, founding, you know, eventually, so that
Okay.
this, so I can kind of keep this sustainable, you know, keep it at like a sustainable, ongoing. So like there'll be a, you know, like a sponsorship and financial sponsorship team. So uh, so there's that quality. There's like connecting. Right now, the empathy community seems a little disconnected. There's a lot of different communities, and it's the conference can be a way of bringing those communities together. So it's like networking. It's kind of like this community organizing aspect. And for me, if it's personally, it's just fun. I mean, it's like fun. Talking with you is fun. You know, it's like, you
Yeah.
know, having having um, you know, these panel discussions is a lot of fun. Doing the interviews, it's like I'm learning. It's like it's kind of my way. It's kind of like my quest too. So it's kind of, it has a real fulfilling kind of a quality to it. So how about for you? How do you see that?
Um, I like what you know, like I resonate what you're saying here, like creating an opportunity to engage and recruit people, you know, and you know, offer people opportunities to be engaged and become something, you know, become part of something larger than themselves. I think, you know, that's what I resonate with. Um, in a way, I think it's an opportunity to sort of, you know, just get everything organized. It's like, you know, this is a place where you can actually learn um, about empathy. This is a place where you can engage with other people with similar values. This is, you know, a place where you can actually make empathy, you know, a practical part of your life. Excuse me. Um,
Yeah, I'm just writing that down here. So it's like become part of something larger uh, than yourself. Get everything organized. Can learn about empathy, engage with others, and make it a practical part of your life.
yeah, yeah, I think that's,
Yeah,
yeah,
it
those are the
is.
keys.
It's like you can take a workshop, you know, on empathy, but this is like you can do some kind of engagement and kind of be involved too.
Yeah,
Like you're personally actively engaged in doing something, because you can kind of help on the conference, and you can do it from the ease of your house in New Zealand, in Auckland, New Zealand, you know.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, this is just so amazing, this whole Skype thing for me. Just that.
um, yeah, I mean that's the other thing, you know. Maybe is there a way we can incorporate workshops in the conference itself? You know, um, you know, how would we actually do that?
I had talked with my colleague Mutima about that. We have that empathy curriculum team that we can actually have small group discussions and have an outline, an empathy kind of a workshop outline.
Right.
And so we can kind of get that kind of started. And then it would be for the volunteers, who are working, that we could, have, 8 or 10 people, kind of work through this outline. And something that might be good is actually to kind of start with people who want to work on developing a curriculum. So it becomes an empathy curriculum development team. And we kind of present it. And the idea is there's a lot of videos to it that we can incorporate around empathy. And it's bringing all those videos into an organized, step-by-step systematic curriculum. But for that, it'd be good to have really good curriculum development people. There's people who are specialized in, doing that, and we definitely need, that.
Yeah.
That community. It's like it's not everybody's, skill to create curriculum.
Yeah. I mentioned to you last week, that I was involved in setting up, facilitation training, for this attitudinal healing group that we're having, that we started off here in Auckland, and one of the most powerful ways of actually, developing facilitation skills, at that time, obviously, we didn't, this is, late 80s and whatnot, we didn't have Skype, we didn't have anything like that. But, in a room where people were actually, experiencing a facilitated group where they could, share their, most intimate feelings and thoughts around their lives, the things that are actually, right here and now.
Yeah.
And other people listening very deeply to that. It was such a powerful, transformative experience. People that actually shift, and it was just an amazing experience. I'd really, really love to be able to replicate that online.
Uh-huh.
Is there a way, we could actually do that, where you could replicate that feeling online, with intimate groups of other people. Because in a way, sort of being online, can be a little bit impersonal,
Yeah.
But when you're physically in a group, in a room, in a group, there are no distractions or anything like that. And everybody is focused on you around your specific issues, and they're listening to your story. You can imagine what sort of transformative experience that can actually be.
Yeah, you've brought that up a couple of times about this group that you were part of. And when was that?
Attitudinal healing. That was back in the late 80s.
Oh, late 80s. And so it was like people sitting in a group and kind of just doing kind of deep listening and deep sharing.
Yeah.
And it's like people really get connected, and they kind of open up and share kind of that deeper part of themselves. They're not judged, and it's just a nice feeling. And so how do we, it's nice to do that in a personal group setting, but like Skype can be like a second best or something. Maybe.
Well, it's better than nothing. I mean, like people share, can share the most intimate things on, like on forums and online things like that. But, sometimes you kind of feel that there's a sense of disconnection, because, you're using technology as a conduit, and it's impersonal. That's the best term I've got for it.
Yeah.
It can be impersonal.
Yeah, there's not like an intention that our intention here is to go deeper and kind of be more committed to this.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's like having a group that's kind of more committed to deep listening, deep empathy, and maybe
yeah,
over a more extended period of time.
yeah.
So, you know, I've talked to people about doing something like that. There are some kind of empathic listening groups. I'm starting the Empathizing with Edwin series. I don't know if I told you about that.
No,
Um, I've done a lot of interviews with people, say, oh, you know, tell me about empathy, what's the nature of empathy, and all that kind of stuff. But I'm wanting to now. I'm starting this series where people can empathically listen to me, and I will do that sharing that you're talking about. And they
right.
just give me empathy, you know, just deep listening, no judgment. That's all the stuff that's on the card, right? The
Right.
no judgments, advice, analysis, detachment, diagnosing, sympathy, pity, interruptions, or fixing. And they just listen, maybe do reflective listening, you know, rephrasing, summarizing what they're hearing,
Yeah,
and maybe sharing what's real for them.
yeah.
And I'm
I,
recording it, so.
yeah. Well, the thing is the way these groups the way these groups were set up, you know, back in the 80s and the rest of it, they're pretty much unstructured. You know, they had a sort of organic structure, but the you know, we would start off with you know, like a check-in. You know, everybody would just sort of like check, you know, just sort of say where they're at right now, and then from there, the facilitator would sort of say, well, you know, perhaps you need a little bit more time, or you don't need so much time, or whatever it might be. Then, then we'd read through this list of principles called, you know, the 12 attitudinal healing principles.
Uh-huh.
I mean, they were, you know, like very powerful in and of themselves, but in a way that kind of set the tone for the meeting. They, you know, and there were guidelines as well, you know, but it was really important, you know, like people would default, you know, to their normal way of behaving. You know, somebody bring up an issue and somebody would just sort of automatically jump in with advice or with, you know, trying to fix them or something like that, you know.
Uh-huh.
And it would be up to the facilitator just to sort of like remind that person to sort of say, well, you know, that's not, you know, that's not how we do things here, and, you know, sort of in a way, you know, prevent them from, you know, so that we could actually generate this environment of trust, you know. It was really important to do that, you know, and it's fine having all that stuff explicitly on a card and down there, but it actually comes out, you know, when it's, you know, when you're practicing it or when you're, you know, trying to put it together like that. Because it's when the rubber meets the road, you know, that's when, you know, that's when all these old habits come out, you know, because, you know, if somebody just thinks, well, you know, you know, there is a problem here, this needs to be fixed, and you've got to have you know, you've got to have some sort of advice. I mean, that's how you fix things, is by giving advice, you know.
Yeah.
when truly all you need to be, you know, everybody's got their own resources to actually fix it. You don't actually need advice. You actually need to be heard.
Right.
And it's like when I can truly hear you and hear what your story is, then you get that sort of, that stuff that's just been going round and round in your mind. You get that off your chest and it's out there.
Yeah.
So now you're ready for a new story. You know, now you're ready for the solution. Now you're open to, you know, inspiration or intuition or insight, you know. But you've still got to get that story out. You know, it's sort of like, bang, somebody's got to hear this. You know?
Yeah. Until it's kind of out there, it doesn't let the creativity happen.
Exactly.
There's something about getting it heard and be seen that kind of allows this creative spark to kind of happen in the next step. In your personal development to kind of happen.
Yeah.
So,
there's a you know, this new chapter, and that chapter, the next chapter doesn't unfold until you've, you know, completely heard and understood the first chapter, the preceding chapter. You know, it's like,
Yeah, and it's more than like an intellectual thing. It's like a felt bodily
yeah,
experience too, and it's a
yeah,
whole body.
yeah,
Yeah, that process. I mean, it was a big part with Carl Rogers,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
just put in a link there called "Journey into Self." Carl Rogers. It's a video
yeah.
of
Well, this was, oh, that's cool. Thanks for
of
that, Edwin.
of
Um,
of one of these
I mean,
circles. So
yeah. Well, you know, the attitudinal healing model was very much based on Rogerian model. You know,
yeah,
the Rogerian model. But there's also one of the most influential books, or one of the most pivotal books I've read, is this book called Focusing by Eugene Gendlin. Have you ever read that?
no,
It's and he talks about um, people who are in therapy, and he's saying that an effective therapy session has got at least as much to do, you know, with how the client processes it, not with how the therapist processes it. And he sort of, you know, through thousands, he recorded thousands of therapy sessions, and you know, you could sort of, in a way, over that period of time, you could sort of see where the most effective therapy sessions were, and the most effective therapy sessions were self-initiated by clients who, and there was this specific process that they went through. But ultimately, it was being able to sort of like, you know, there's the way the problem presents itself is pretty much just the symptoms of the problem. But, and a good therapist would be able to reflect back and sort of say, oh, is it like this? And the client would say, no, it's more like this. Oh, you mean like that? Yes, it's like that. So there would be some sort of resonance with, you know, what was being said and what was being recognized and what was actually being felt. And the client would actually sort of like reflect on their own sense of being, you know, their own way of being, you know, in their body and the rest of it. And it is a physical sense, you know, that there is like there's a blockage there somewhere, or, you know, you could actually feel it in your body. And when you're able to express that and articulate that out in the open, and you started resonating with that, he called it the felt sense.
uh-huh.
You know, it wasn't just an intellectual sense. It wasn't just an emotional sense. It was actually a, you know, almost physical, you know, sense. And, you know, then he went through the whole process of being able to shift that felt sense, you know, and, you know, sort of like welcome it, you know, give it space. And, you know, it's like being internally empathetic, you know.
Yeah, kind of the self-empathy, sort of a
Yeah,
self-empathy kind of,
yeah,
maybe. Well, I think, you know, I'm, you know, familiar with these type of groups, and I don't know if you're familiar with Esalen Institute, but it's a,
I've heard of it.
oh, yeah, I lived
about it.
there. I lived there for a year, and it was all kinds of things like this. It was kind of like that they did, but it was, what was I going to say is, I think what I'm looking to add to this is that a lot of those type of groups, it was like a self-development kind of a group, right? It's like or it's self-hearing, and it's focused on self-empathy. I think what I'm trying to add is that the self-empathy is kind of like a precursor to deepening your empathy with others,
Yeah,
as well as making it it's kind of like that evangelical empathy, is that it's not just that, hey, it's like if you live in a concentration, a lot of this stuff is like we live in just it's extreme metaphors. We live in a concentration camp, and there's people
yeah,
going around saying, you know, let's just listen, you know, I'll listen to you and hear you, and it feels so good being heard, and you know, we're going to do mindfulness, and it's like, and then it's like, you know, okay, that's where it kind of stops and it feels good, but there's a need to actually transform the concentration camp, to overthrow the paradigm, the social paradigm that's abusive, that's sending us all to the gas chamber kind of thing. And we can't do it by maybe beating up the guards. We got to somehow kind of organize and kind of turn the guards into empaths too, right? And how do you do that? So we create this conference in the concentration camp, and it's for overthrowing the whole paradigm, to create a culture of empathy. We're going to overthrow the system of judgment, the system of fixing, the system of fear, of alienation.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I'm seeing the conference. The conference is to overthrow the concentration camp, but to do it and instill a culture of empathy. But the only way of doing it is to use empathy. We have to empathize with the fear and pain and alienation that everybody in the whole system kind of feels.
Yeah. Yeah. Including the guards.
Including the guards, including, their superiors, etc.
And I mean, that's it. It's sort of, I think there's this huge shift that's actually happening in humanity right now. And, I can get sort of, a bit new agey about it all, but I think there's this sort of like, there's this awakening, this flowering of consciousness that is just sort of like, it's ready to sort of, bloom right now, right at this point in time, and it's just amazing. I mean, the internet is sort of, accelerated a lot of that. It's certainly, facilitated a lot of that. Where we start recognizing that we are actually one. We aren't, you can't define me as just this like, this image of a body or, whatever it might be. There is way more to me than this sort of, this physical, aspect of myself. There's a hell of a lot more. And, there's a hell of a lot more to, everyone else, and it's like when we can get beyond this sort of individualized sense of self.
Yeah.
We start, that's where our real strength lies. The strength isn't in the individual. It's in the, it's in individuals working together. It's coming together,
Yeah, kind of the shared reality, the shared sense of humanity.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's where I was interviewing Marco Iacoboni, and we did that panel yesterday. So that's his work is about showing scientifically how that reality is not a fiction, how that is actually how physical reality is from a scientific point of view. Because through mirror neurons, we are constantly sharing the reality of others and creating this kind of like shared sense of reality.
Yeah, yeah. That's So
you're saying about the shared consciousness. I mean, there's kind of like a movement towards that now, or at least that's what you're seeing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm very optimistic about that, but I have been for a long, long time. It's sort of like see this, these, power hierarchies, these, that are shaped like, pyramids and the rest of it, and they're, crumbling down, and it's becoming a lot more organic. It's not sort of like, it's not static. It's, there's a new sense of dynamism and how real power is actually created and used. And it's not all just sort of like pointing to an elite anymore. It's kind of, it's become a lot more dispersed and decentralized, So, and, empathy is, features as, part of that, well, yeah, it's a huge part of that. sort of new paradigm of power. Yeah, and I don't know whether I'm making sense at all, Edwin, but
Yeah, I see that too. It's the you're saying about. I mean, you can have kind of like a hierarchical based system. You know, it tends to be kind of based on fear and you know, superiority and all that. Or you can have an empathic model where people are kind of connecting to each other and to the kind of a more shared reality. And I
yeah,
think that that model, you know, like democracy, you know, even and you know, you can have and even more towards. I mean, we can even move the spectrum farther to more empathic connection.
yeah, yeah,
And it's like, how do we do that? You know, I think we have to kind of learn a lot of and to
yeah,
and
and I think it also the thing is that I think people have grown so used to one way of you know the hierarchical model of power, and they're so used to you know all their habits, you know all their skills, their whole perception and the rest of it is so fixated by this and so conditioned by this that anything outside of that or any alternative is actually really scary to them. You know, their world, you know, is built on this sort of like hierarchical sort of, you know, system of power. And yet the rules are actually changing. And that is really scary. They don't feel secure anymore.
well, I think that's why if we want to create a culture of empathy, we have to empathize with that fear
Yeah.
and have to listen to it and really acknowledge it. And for example, I went to the Republican state convention here,
Yeah.
which, you know, we have Democrats, Republicans. And I asked
Yeah.
people, I said, tell me about, you know, what's your most important value? And, you know, I talked to a couple of young Republicans and they were saying, well, protection is the most important, you know, value for me. And I said, oh, you're kind of concerned about, you know, people doing you harm. He says, yeah, we're going to protect ourselves. And so I said, so you're concerned about people not empathizing with you, because if they empathized with you, they wouldn't be doing harm to you. And he said, yeah. And then it's like, I guess so, you know, he said. And then the dialogue became around how do we create more empathy together, you know, which is really, you know, everybody wants it.
Well, nobody, and that's the point. I think you've hit on a really important point. Is you know, people who don't sort of associate empathy with strength, who see it as a sign of weakness, and you know, or if they had more empathy, they would actually be taken advantage of. They'd be more vulnerable, and the rest of it. You know, how do you get them to value empathy? You know, it's you know, how do you get them to value what they see essentially as valueless to them? You know,
Yeah,
I mean,
well, if we're living,
empathy isn't the main tool that you would actually use to live in a hierarchically, you know, structured, you know, power situation. That isn't the tool. The tool that you'd use is competition, you know, being better than everybody else, you know, and, you know, attack and defense and all that sort of stuff, you know. And if you do away with that and substitute it for empathy, then that person is going to say, what? You know, how can, you know, I can't even use this here, you know.
well,
I'm destroyed.
well, I think you've just discovered a topic for your panel.
What's that?
It's just what you're saying now. It's like, why would people be empathic in a hierarchical system?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah.
Well, those are all the kind of things we're going to be, you know, exploring in the conference. So we kind of got away from the list here.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I think we've been going at it for about an hour and a half, so we probably should wind it down, getting a little.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what's the next step from here, you reckon?
Well, I can put this online, you know, tonight.
Yeah.
It'll be, you know, just I think it's taking what's been written already, you know, I don't know if you're willing to kind of look it through, organize it in any way, or and then it's also we have it online if you're wanting to review, what's been said, and we could even take this document and bring some other people into the discussion and get some other perspectives, around these ideas, and have the document keep evolving and developing.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's cool. All right. So, what do you want me to leave this up to you to sort of, move it forward from here, or is there something that you want me to do, or?
When I I'll put the video online. It'll be online by tomorrow.
Okay.
If you want to review it as of what we said and kind of take this document and like kind of organize it and give it more shape.
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I'll work on that. I'll work on shaping the document a little bit, or a version of it anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
cool.
we'll have the full interview, not interview, but just dialogue here.
Yeah.
Too, that can be referenced.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're feeling, up to it, you could actually go through it and kind of create an outline of what we talked about. And I can create it on a web page, so we'll have like an outline, and all those different topics that we came up with, we can use as jumping off topics to go into more depth as well. And they could be topics for panels as well.
Yeah. That'd be good. A useful tool that I use a lot is mind mapping. Do you know of any online mind maps that we can, collaborate on?
I know they're out there. I've seen some, but I think just if you want to research that, just a Google search, I'd seen some out there, but
okay, I'll have a look around. I'll have a play around with that.